My name is Silas Trenholm, was born and raised in Sussex County, Delaware. I am retired groundskeeper and former forest ranger who spent over 5 decades walking the edge of Blackbird Forest. I never talks much, unless you ask about the laughter. Before the trees swallowed the buildings, before the laughter faded into the moss, there was a place the maps refused to name. The locals only speak of it after dark. A forgotten orphanage hidden deep in Blackbird Forest. No address, no records. But ask anyone who's lived near the woods, and they'll tell you the same thing. After midnight, the children still laugh. This is the story they tried to bury. Ask anyone who grew up in southern Delaware, and they'll tell you never to walk past Blackbird Forest after midnight, not because of wolves, not because of criminals, but because that's where the laughter begins. They won't always say it directly. In fact, most won't bring it up, unless you ask. But it's there, in how they glance at the woods while driving by, in how they grip the steering wheel just a little tighter when they pass that final bend near the southern edge, in the way their voices drop when asked about the forest line, the silence that always follows when the question hangs too long in the air. That silence isn't hesitation, it's caution. Because whatever happened in those trees, whatever still happens, they've learned it's better left alone. Still, some things slip through. Local kids dare each other to step past the fence after dark. Most only make it a few feet. Some claim they made it all the way to the hollow near the bend, where the tree roots twist like arms. And a few, just a few, say they heard it. The laughter. Software, high-pitched, unplaceable, but always from the same direction. Somewhere deeper in, always just far enough to sound like it might be in your head. And yet, the stories are always the same. No one ever sees anyone. There are no footprints, no tire tracks, no echo of a game or a camp or any gathering, just that sound. And then, silence. Some say it's a prank. Others chalk it up to echo or to strange acoustics created by the density of the trees. But those explanations never satisfy the locals, because the laughter, they say, has been happening for generations, as far back as anyone can remember. And that's where the trail goes cold. Because if you start to ask where it comes from, where, exactly, in the woods, the sound originates, some people will look at you with a warning in their eyes. They'll lower their voice. They'll say, "There used to be a building out there. Something small, made of brick. You can't see it now, but it's there. Or was." And then, just as quickly, they'll stop talking. Here's what makes that strange. There are no records of any orphanage ever being constructed in that area. Not on file with the state, not in any registry, no deeds, no tax information, no blueprints, nothing. Just whispers, local rumor. Things passed down at family dinner tables or overheard on fishing trips, and yet, in almost every version of the story, there was an orphanage, one no one wants to acknowledge, one that, if it ever existed, was erased with purpose. No name, no dates, no list of children, just fragments. There's an old man, goes by Mr. Halvers, who still lives off Route 9. He's 84 now, grew up around here, doesn't speak much. But one afternoon last fall, he agreed to meet us at the edge of his property. We asked him about the forest. At first, he just shook his head. Then, after a pause, he said something we haven't forgotten. He said, "My brother used to hear them. Every night after our parents went to bed. Said they were playing, said it sounded like tag. One night, he followed it. Didn't come home for 2 days." We asked what happened when his brother returned. Mr. Halvers looked away and said, he stopped talking for a year. After that, he wouldn't go near the window. There are more stories like that. Quiet ones, family ones, the kind people don't share with reporters, but behind the veil of ordinary life in this part of Delaware. There's a deep discomfort when Blackbird Forest is mentioned. People avoid it. Paths don't cross it. Houses are built facing away from it. And late at night, if you roll down your window near the southern ridge, you might hear it too. That thin, distant laughter. In 2012, a man named Grant Dobbins disappeared near Blackbird Forest, a 31-year-old biology teacher, a trail runner, experienced in shape and known for taking his evening jogs through remote stretches of Delaware's lowland preserves. He set out for a routine 5-mile loop. He never came back. Search teams mobilized within 24 hours. Over 60 volunteers, 3 canine units, and multiple drones. They found his car, parked off the trailhead, unlocked, still with his phone inside. But here's the part that wasn't released publicly. Multiple members of the search party reported hearing unexplained noises during the sweep. Whispers, giggling, like children playing in the trees. One fire captain wrote in a log that it sounded like a group of kids on a playground just out of sight. Another noted that a team was overcome by a feeling of sudden nausea and cold near an old willow grove just beyond the trail bend, a place not marked on any map. One of the dogs, a black lab trained in wilderness recovery, refused to enter the grove, barked, whined, then turned and ran back toward the trucks. Grant's body was never found. No evidence of a struggle, no signs of foul play. He just vanished in daylight on a marked trail. When local law enforcement was asked if foul play was no indication of anything criminal. When asked about the forest itself, one officer simply said, "That place has its own rules." We dug deeper. We went through every available public document for Kent County, searching for any mention of a child care facility, youth camp, or residential building near Blackbird Forest. Nothing. Not even a condemned structure. But there was one lead, an old box in a state archive, misfiled under property disputes from the 1940s. Inside were handwritten letters, notes, receipts for deliveries of flour, soap, and kerosene. None had a return address, but each one was signed only with the initials CW and listed delivery instructions that led unmistakably to the coordinates that border the southern fringe of Blackbird Forest. The contents of the letters are brief but chilling. One reads, "3 more taken in today. All quiet now. Screams stopped by dawn. No sign of the boy from Friday." Another reads, "Inspector never came." Good. They'd never understand what we're doing. They never do. No official documents accompany the box. No explanation for its presence in the archive. But based on dates, content, and handwriting style, the letters appear to be genuine, possibly linked to a private, unlicensed facility operating sometime between 1935 and 1951. We showed the letters to a retired state historian. Her conclusion? That they could be connected to what she referred to as unauthorized care sites, places that once took in unwanted children in the decades before formal foster systems were in place. When we asked how many of these types of places existed in Delaware, she answered, "Fewer than you think, but more than we'll ever admit." So here we are, a forest that makes grown men avoid their own land, a missing person whose final steps vanish into air, and an orphanage no one will claim but everyone remembers. And still, the laughter continues. If you think you've heard every haunted tale, every forest myth, every missing person story tied to a local legend, this one is different. Because unlike most legends, this one left traces. They were hidden, buried, forgotten, but they're still here. And if you're the kind of person who wants the truth pulled from the dark, who isn't satisfied with answers that come too easily, then what we found next will stay with you. Because there are places in this country that were never meant to be remembered. But some stories don't stay buried. And if you listen closely, the children are still laughing. If you're still watching, it means you've heard the laughter too. Stay close, because what comes next gets darker. Subscribe to MindFuel, because this is just the beginning. If the laughter still echoes in the woods of Blackbird Forest, then its origin may lie far beyond the reach of satellite maps or even local memory. To find it, you have to look where few have ever dared to look, into the places the state quietly buried. The further we dug into Delaware's historical archives, the more gaps we found. Records that should exist simply didn't. Years where local census data abruptly dropped. Property maps showing structures that were never labeled, never zoned, never even acknowledged in the county's land use database. What we did find was something else, something older. In the early 1900s, Delaware, like much of the United States, saw the rise of privately run childcare homes. Many were set up by well-meaning individuals or by small congregations that promised care for orphans, runaways, and children deemed unfit for mainstream society. But these homes weren't monitored. There was no federal body to oversee them, no standardized inspections, no child advocacy programs. And in the rural regions of southern Delaware, they often operated in complete isolation. We uncovered an internal state memo dated 1954, referencing a list of non-compliant care homes. It was stamped confidential and included just 6 entries. 4 were shut down. 1 had already burned to the ground, and the 6th was blacked out entirely. A thick rectangle of ink, hiding whatever name had once been written there. There's a pattern with places that are meant to disappear. The names are always scratched out first, then the maps, then the memories. But some stories don't fade. Not entirely. We found an interview transcript from 1987 with a woman named Lila Whitford, who lived her entire life just outside Blackbird. At the time of the interview, she was 79 years old. Her voice, crackling on tape, sounded tired. But when asked about the forest, she grew alert, nervous. Her grandmother, she said, used to tell her bedtime stories, but not the kind with fairies or princes. Hers were about the laughing girls, as she described them as barefoot children, pale as ash, who ran between the trees long after sundown. Her grandmother said they were the lost ones, the ones who burned. But what stayed with Lila the most wasn't the image. It was the sound. She said her grandmother would hum at night, a tune with no words, just soft, rhythmic notes. It always started the same way. 3 hums, a pause, then laughter. Lila said it wasn't until she was older that she realized her grandmother wasn't humming a lullaby. She was remembering a chant. That chant, as we would later discover, matched a phrase that appeared in several scattered references from obscure religious texts printed in the early 20th century, pamphlets attributed to a fringe sect known as the Children of the Gladdened Flame. A religious group with no central church, no formal archives, and only whispers to account for their presence in the rural Northeast. The group believed that laughter was the purest form of devotion, that in laughter the soul was cleansed, and that children, untainted by the world, could offer the purest joy. Their doctrine held that suffering, when masked by laughter, was a divine act. Their motto, later found carved into the broken stone of a dining hall wall unearthed near Blackbird Forest in 1991, read, "Through joy, we cast out sin." We obtained a photograph of the carving, blurred and faded by lichen, but legible. And below it, almost obscured by the rubble, were 3 small handprints, pressed into the stone like a child's permanent offering. No name, no date, and still no official record of the structure's existence. Then came the newspaper clippings. We consulted a regional historian in Georgetown who maintains a private archive of early 1900 newspapers, many of which were printed only once in small batches and never digitized. In a 1913 edition of the Delaware County Observer, buried on page 6 beneath a classified ad for horses, we found a headline: "Smoke seen above Blackbird. Residents report strange sounds glow." No follow-up article was ever printed, no fire was logged with local authorities, no casualty list, no site inspection. But the article noted one disturbing detail: that several residents reported hearing the laughter of children while the smoke rose. One witness, a farmer named T. Alton Wells, described it this way: "Like they was playing in a schoolyard, only the voices didn't sound quite right. Too high, like they was laughing through clenched teeth." We tracked down the census records for Mr. Wells. He died in 1914, just 1 year later. According to his death certificate, he suffered cardiac arrest after what his wife described as months of nightly hallucinations and unrelenting fear. We tried to verify the fire. There are no records in the fire marshal's logs, no investigation. But what we did find, hidden in an envelope at the back of the historian's files, was a photograph. Sepia-toned, damaged, but unmistakable. It showed what appeared to be a brick building, no more than 2 stories tall. Ivy creeping along the side, windows shattered, and in the foreground, a group of young girls seated in rows, hands folded in their laps. None smiling, none looking directly at the camera, all dressed in identical white shifts. Someone, likely the photographer, had written a date at the bottom corner: July 6, 1913. That was the day before the smoke was reported. If you look closely at the photograph, beneath the fold, right in the center, there's a dark shape in one of the windows. It could be a shadow, a trick of the light, but once you've seen it, you can't unsee it. It's a figure, watching. And that brings us back to the stories, because the stories never say how the girls died, only that they burned, and that the laughter didn't stop. It just changed. We reached out to another witness, a woman named Corinne Lasker, who lived in Felton until her death in 2003. Her daughter agreed to speak with us. She said that when she was a child, her mother would forbid her from entering the southern edge of the woods. Not because it was dangerous, but because of the stories passed down in their family. Corinne's grandmother had worked at a home for girls briefly for just 6 weeks. In the summer of 1913, she quit after a single incident. One night, she said, the girls were marched out to a clearing, told to laugh in unison. Those who didn't were taken back inside. When asked what happened to them, she only ever said, they weren't heard from again. Corinne kept a single item from her grandmother, a cloth-bound journal, mostly blank, but on the inside cover was a handwritten note. It read, "Never forget the sound of laughter without joy. It is the sound of something pretending to be human. There's more, much more. But this intersection between rumor, history, and trace evidence is what lingers. Because when you peel back enough layers, when you stop asking what can be proven and start asking what was intentionally hidden, a clearer picture begins to form. A fire never reported, children never named, laughter that doesn't fade, and somewhere under the moss and leaves of Blackbird Forest, the foundation stones remain, cold, silent, waiting. If the truth is buried here, it was never meant to be found. But in the next chapter, we'll show you what was found, because one man made it inside, and he never truly came back. They said it was just a local legend, But legends don't leave evidence behind. Subscribe now, because we're not done digging. And what we found next? You won't believe it. You'd be surprised what still lingers on forgotten message boards. In early 2021, a man named Eli Turner, an independent documentarian and self-styled fringe historian, posted a question on a back-channel exploration forum used by urban spelunkers, amateur archivists, and people who simply enjoy trespassing where they shouldn't. He asked, "Anyone familiar with the ruins near Blackbird State Forest? No marked roads, just some uneven brickwork and stone undergrowth." It was mostly ignored, except for one reply. No name, no avatar, just a sentence. "You want proof? Go to the root cellar. Follow the smell of oranges." It would become the sentence Eli repeated the most in his recordings. Eli Turner wasn't a ghost hunter. He didn't believe in folklore. What he believed in was overlooked history. Those places tucked into the forgotten folds of America where records failed and memory frayed. His channel, Tarnished Atlas, had fewer than 3,000 subscribers at the time, but his videos were meticulous, measured. The way he cataloged collapsed rail stations or mothballed veterans' homes spoke to a reverence that went deeper than clicks. When he arrived in Delaware, he didn't announce it. There were no trailers, no countdowns, just a video uploaded on a gray March afternoon. The title was simple: Unmarked Foundation in Blackbird Woods, First Survey. The footage begins like so many others. Gravel shoulder, dense trees, and then just beneath a break in the undergrowth, the remnants of something. A low, crumbling wall, red brick, weather-stained. Ivy had clawed across most of it. Eli's voice, calm as ever, narrated over the visuals. He noted the structure had no form, no discernible layout, no obvious entrance, just fragments. It looked like a half-remembered place in a dream. But what unsettled him wasn't the ruin. It was the absence of life. "I've been walking for nearly 2 miles, Eli said, "and I haven't heard a single bird, not one. No insects either, just trees. And this." He panned the camera toward the clearing. "This air feels wrong. It's not just cold, it's still, like the forest is holding its breath." Then, faint, barely audible over the crunch of his boots, there was a sound. Laughter. Distant. High. Too high. As if it had caught on the wind, but there was no wind to carry it. Eli paused, whispered something to himself off camera, and then he stepped forward. The footage jumps ahead, Eli noting that he discovered a half-buried stairwell leading downward. He called it the pit, but in later interviews, he clarified what it really was. It was the cellar, or part of it, bricked over long ago, probably reinforced after the fire. The stone looked scorched. You could see it. Dark layers beneath the moss. But someone had chipped through it. On camera, Eli crawled through a jagged hole, just wide enough to slip inside. The screen went dark for a moment, then flickered into green. He'd switched to night vision. Inside, the temperature dropped. Eli's breath fogged, even though the outside air was spring warm. The room itself, low-ceilinged and narrow, was made of stone. A root cellar, yes, but deeper than most. Almost deliberately deep, as if meant to hold more than just food. The camera swept across the dirt floor, then stopped. There, half buried, was a child's toy. A spinning top, wood-carved with faded paint and delicate grooves. It dated back to the 1920s, maybe earlier. But the soil around it. This was fresh, Eli said later. Someone or something had just disturbed the earth. He brushed it off. The top wobbled slightly in his palm. And then, a noise, right behind the camera. A short, sharp intake of breath, like a child gasping through laughter. Eli spun around. Nothing there, just stone and cold and dirt. But on the video, for a split second, Something flickered behind him, a faint reflection, like a pale face in the lens, round, blurred. He didn't mention it, not then. Maybe he hadn't seen it. What he did say next is more disturbing. There's a smell in here, not rot, not mildew, something else. Oranges, like peel, like a lunchbox left too long in the sun. It matched the forum post exactly. He stayed in the cellar for 20 more minutes. Quiet, listening. Every so often, the microphone picked up tiny, irregular noises. Taps, like fingernails on stone, breathing maybe, or something imitating it. Eventually, Eli surfaced and returned to the clearing. That should have been the end of it, but it wasn't. He didn't pack up his gear. He didn't leave. He stayed. That night, he set up so 2 trail cameras facing the structure's remains. One infrared, one motion sensitive. He pitched a tent 10 yards away just outside the clearing and filmed a short log entry before turning in. I know I shouldn't, but I want to see what happens here after dark. Whatever this place was, it's waiting. The final footage from that video is static. His tent lit from within, the forest a black wall. Behind it. Then, in the middle of the night, a laugh. Short, sharp, singular. The camera didn't glitch. It didn't cut. But something crossed the frame. Too fast to identify. Low to the ground. Thin. Moving unnaturally. The video ends with Eli's final whispered words, recorded just after 3 a.m. on his night mic. I thought I heard them giggling, but it wasn't outside the tent. It was above it. Then silence. He woke up the next morning, packed up, uploaded the footage a week later. But something had changed. His next post was different, quieter. He didn't title it. He just uploaded a single audio recording. No introduction, no narration, just breathing. And a voice. His voice. Whispering over and over. They don't want us to laugh, they want to wear it. That was the last post on Tarnished Atlas. Eli stopped uploading, stopped answering emails. His account went dark, his phone disconnected. According to his cousin, who lived in Dover, Eli returned home briefly, but he wasn't the same. He didn't speak. He didn't sleep. He just sat outside, staring at the woods behind the house. He never explained what happened in the cellar. Only once did he mention it, weeks later, in a voicemail left at 2:11 a.m. The message was short. There were more stairs beneath the dirt. I didn't go down them, but something came up. We'll play that voicemail in the next chapter, and what we found beneath the surface of that cellar. We'll change everything we thought we knew about Blackbird Forest, because there's more than one kind of laughter, and some kinds don't belong to anything living. If you think this was unsettling, you haven't seen what Eli recorded next. Hit subscribe. What you're about to hear, it wasn't meant for the public. Eli Turner never said he was frightened. Even in his final journal entries, handwritten, scribbled in the margins of old national park maps, he never used the word. What he did write, over and over again in increasingly uneven lines, was, "It didn't follow me." It was already waiting. After uploading the footage of his initial exploration, the cellar, the laughter, the toy, Eli did something he had never done before. He returned. Not just to the ruins, but to stay longer, to sleep there again. It was April 8th, 2021. Sunset came early behind the thick canopy. The trees that had once sheltered the fringe orphanage now loomed overhead like sentinels. At 7:42 p.m., Eli set up 2 new trail cameras, one facing the cellar, one facing his tent, and a third mounted just above the rearview mirror in his van, facing outward. He left the van unlocked. He said in his log, "I don't think any of this is physical. If it wants to come in, it doesn't need a door." He was right. That night, the recordings began normally, tree limbs shifting, the occasional snap of twigs, distant rustle. Nothing concrete, Nothing you wouldn't expect in deep forest. But at 1:13 a.m., something changed. On the thermal camera, grainy, muted greens and blacks, a figure moved. Not walking, skipping. Small, very small. No more than 4 feet tall, no heat signature, just a cold spot, like the absence of something alive. It passed in front of the cellar. The camera glitched briefly, dropped 3 seconds, and then resumed. The next 10 seconds are the most studied piece of footage on Eli's channel. They've been analyzed, color-corrected, slowed down, stabilized. But no amount of digital sharpening can soften what comes next. A voice, clear, intentional, right beside the microphone, but not spoken into it. It sounds like Eli's voice. Identical. Cadence, tone, even the slight rasp he had from years of allergies. But the words, "You shouldn't be here." There was no external speaker. Eli hadn't recorded that line. The timestamp shows he was still asleep in his tent. But somehow, the voice comes through, as if whispered from inside the microphone's own wiring. 5 minutes later, the van's security cam activates. No movement is detected outside, but something moves inside. The lens fogs slightly, as if something, passed directly in front of it. There's a hiss of static, then a shape, subtle, pressed against the rear window glass. A handprint, small, delicate, 5 fingers, thin. But it was on the inside. The van was empty and locked. When Eli returned to the vehicle at 6:03 a.m. the following morning, he paused at the back doors. The recording shows him looking at something, standing still for nearly a minute. He doesn't speak. Then he opens the hatch. Inside, nothing. Everything where he left it. Tripod bag, flashlight, spare batteries, except for one thing. A single child's sock, vintage, hand-stitched, pale blue with frilled edges, folded, placed on the driver's seat. And the smell. He wrote in his notebook, "It's stronger now. Like someone burned sugar and citrus peel in an old wood stove. Thick, clinging. The kind of smell that doesn't just linger, it seeps. My clothes carry it. My fingers." He drove into town later that morning, tried to wash it off at a gas station bathroom, scrubbed his hands raw. Still couldn't get rid of it. He bought gloves and returned to the woods. Back at the site, something had changed. There were marks in the dirt, not footprints, indentations, as if something had danced. Dozens of them, all small. The spacing was off, too close together for any normal child to make. Toes pointed inward, arcs of soil kicked up in perfect crescents. The cellar door had shifted. The bricks he'd propped around the hole the night before were moved aside. Not scattered, arranged. 3 bricks placed equidistant, forming a triangle. In the center, a broken music box. Not old, not vintage, new, mass-produced. The kind sold in convenience stores. But the song? He played it once in the footage, a recording of a lullaby not used in over a century. The Laughing Girls, a tune sung by children in coastal Delaware orphanages during the early 20th century. The lyrics, in part, "Smile wide, and don't you cry, they only take the ones who lie. If you're good, they'll fight, yeah, they'll pass you by, bro. But laugh too loud and you must die." That night, his second on the property, Eli didn't sleep. He left all cameras running, sat in his tent with only a small lantern, his journal, and an audio recorder. At 3:41 a.m., every camera went black for 12 seconds, then returned. Only now, the angle had changed. The cellar camera was facing downward, into the pit. Something had turned it, manually, steadily, not shaking, not random. The lens panned until it stopped at the dark hole below, and then, out of frame, something hummed. Software, childlike. Just a note at first, then a second. No lyrics, just the sound of someone, while humming the lullaby. That same dreadful tune. Eli never published the full footage of that night. What he did share was a freeze frame from the cellar camera. One frame, time-stamped 3:43:17 a.m. In the still, something is barely visible at the bottom edge. A reflection on stone. Too tall to be a child, too narrow to be a person. Its outline is curved like shoulders stooped forward, and its face, well, there isn't one. Just a blur, as if whatever it was refused to be remembered. In the weeks that followed, Eli never returned to Blackbird, but others did. Most didn't make it far. One group of local ghost hunters who entered the site at dusk found their equipment dead within minutes. Another woman, an independent folklorist from Wilmington, collapsed just inside the tree line, nose bleeding, claiming she'd seen rows of smiling faces underground. But the most chilling came from a man who didn't go looking at all. A state park employee tasked with trail cleanup. He filed an unofficial report with the county, handwritten, barely legible. But this part stood out. Was cleaning debris by Route 471 when I smelled oranges and ash. Thought someone had lit a campfire. Looked up, saw 3 little girls standing by the trees, matching clothes, holding hands. I looked down to grab my radio, looked up again. Gone. But I kept hearing them laugh. I could feel it in my teeth. He quit 2 days later, moved to Pennsylvania. Whatever was awakened in those woods, it hadn't been buried deep enough. And Eli's visit stirred more than just memory, because now others are hearing it. The laughter, at midnight, on trails that were supposed to be safe, and always, just before it starts, the faint, sweet smell of burnt sugar and oranges. You heard the voice, you saw the print, and yet Eli wasn't even there. Subscribe now. Because in the next part, he finds something that was never meant to be unearthed. By the time Eli Turner returned to the orphanage ruins for the 3rd time, there was no question he had become obsessed. His followers noticed it in his uploads. The meticulous voiceovers were gone, replaced by handheld vlogs, unpolished, unedited, erratic. He looked thinner. His eyes sunken, darting. Each video was shorter and yet somehow more intense. You could see it in his breathing, in the way he whispered when he thought the camera was off. The kind of whispers meant for no one, not even himself. But the final video, the one investigators would later pull from his backup SD card, never made it to the channel. It was dated May 2nd. The title file read, Root Cellar Final. It begins at 10:23 a.m. Eli is alone. His voice is muffled by the sound of wind. He's wearing a heavy coat even though it's spring. He keeps saying the same phrase as he moves deeper into the site. I found it, I found it. He's carrying a folding spade and a crowbar. The footage is shaky, but at one point, he turns the camera toward what appears to be a stone slab, about 4 feet wide, half buried beneath brambles and ivy. He clears the vegetation, revealing a rusted iron ring bolted to the center of the stone. He pulls. It doesn't give. He pulls again. Eventually, with a metallic groan and the dull thud of shifting earth, the slab slides just enough to reveal a hollow below. A crawl space. Rough-hewn brick walls, no more than 2 feet high. Eli drops his flashlight inside. The beam cuts across the dirt like a scalpel, and what it lands on. At first, it just looks like scratches, graffiti. But as the light holds, they come into focus. Names, carved directly into the brick, hundreds of them, but every one ending with the same letter, L. An entire generation of initials etched in desperation. Some carved over each other, some repeated. A few are written backward, childlike, inconsistent. One is larger than the rest, written 3 times in a loop. Mabel L. Eli whispers something off camera. They're all from one family? Number no, this was something else. They gave them the same last name. Then, his voice shifts. Not fear, something closer to awe. He points the camera toward the far wall and zooms in. A page, pinned to the brick with a rusted nail. Yellowed, brittle, but intact. A diary entry, scrawled in pencil, child's handwriting. He reads aloud. We're told to laugh before the sun sets. Loud as we can. They said if we laugh long enough, the fire can't catch us. He pauses. There's more. His flashlight moves downward. Another note, torn, barely legible. Don't stop. Don't stop smiling. Don't stop. Don't stop. Don't. The rest is unreadable. Eli's breathing quickens. He crawls in. The footage goes dark for a moment, camera pressed against fabric, likely his chest. Then it stabilizes. Light bounces around the narrow chamber. There's no insulation, just dirt, decay, the memory of warmth long since gone. He whispers again, but this time it's barely audible. A hum is building under his words, like static through a radio not quite tuned in. Then, laughter. Soft at first. Distant, but not echoing. It's inside the crawl space. And then, from the far end of the chamber, barely visible, another opening. Smaller. Just enough for a child to fit. He lifts the camera and begins to move toward it. Every scrape of his clothes echoes like thunder in the confined space. Each breath is louder than the last. The laughter intensifies, now layered, multiple voices, girls, giggling in unison, increasing tempo, but with no joy, mechanical, practiced, like children repeating a song they've been forced to perform too many times. He reaches the second opening. He says, barely above a whisper, "There's something in there." The camera tilts. We never see what he sees, but we hear it. The laughter stops instantly, and then a new sound, a click, like bone against wood. Then, screaming, off-screen. The camera drops. We hear Eli yell once, then silence. The sound continues. Laughter, louder now, overlapping layers of high-pitched joy that fractures into howling. And then, silence. The camera lays in the dirt, lens fogging. 10 minutes pass, no movement, no sound. At 10:49 a.m., the camera's lens picks up a shadow. Something passes over it, barely visible. It's not walking, it's crawling. Closer, closer. And just before the image cuts to black, a voice. Not Eli. High, feminine, small. Tag, you're it. When search and rescue arrived 4 days later, the camera was recovered. Eli was not. The crawl space was sealed. Bricks replaced, mortar still fresh, and behind them, scratched newly into the stone. A single word, laugh. Eli Turner was never found. His channel has been inactive ever since, but his videos, they're still live. And every now and then, a comment appears beneath the final one. The username is always different. The language changes, but the message is always the same. We're still laughing. He wanted answers, but what he found erased him. If you're still with us, subscribe, because someone else recovered the footage, and they brought back something else too. But the message is always the same. We're still laughing. They say fire cleanses, but not everything burns away. Some things stay, etched in wood, in stone, and in the walls of that orphanage. Eli Turner vanished before sunrise, and all we had left was laughter, the kind that starts soft and ends in screaming.